Right. Hi, Hannah.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing great.
Very good to have you here.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you for giving importance to a subject that's near and dear to my heart. Mm-hmm. And I really hope it can open other people's eyes and more people will be interested in finding out about the deaf community.
Hopefully.
They're brothers and sisters here in Kurdistan,
sure. Yeah.
and how the deaf community and the hearing communities can come together. So thank you so much for choosing this.
Well, thank you for being here. And to be honest, I saw you during a seminar, mm-hmm. and it was very interesting. The topic that you discussed related to the deaf community, sign language. Yeah. And not many people talk about it here in Kurdistan. And you were one of the very, very few people that I know who's an activist in this area and right. Who talks about it. So thank you for coming, and thank you for that as well.
Yeah, thank you. And that's, we can talk about my story a little bit later, but that's really kind of what drew me into this, was the fact that there aren't people talking about this. And the deaf community has been marginalized, and they don't have people activating, being activists for them. And that's what drew me really into it. At first, I didn't have a plan of doing what I'm doing now.
Right.
So seeing the need and the open doors was what drew me to it.
Yeah, so you have a very interesting story. You're an American girl.
Yes.
And you came all the way from America to Kurdistan.
Yes.
And now you speak very good Kurdish.
Oh, thank you.
And you probably speak better Kurdish than I speak English, yeah?
No, not at all.
So you came to Kurdistan 7 years ago, I guess, yeah? Mm-hmm. And then what brought you here initially?
Initially, honestly, I can say that since I was a girl, I had this feeling that America wasn't my home, and I wasn't comfortable there. And I always knew that I would leave and go to another country. And
really?
My parents kind of thought I was crazy, and they were like, well, when she gets older, she'll find out how wonderful America is, and she'll just stay here. And it never left me, that idea. And so when I was in high school, I started learning other languages and dreaming of when I could go to another country. Maybe people here understand my parents' mentality. They're considered more conservative in the U.S., where they were like, well, until you get married, you're not leaving our house.
Right.
Which is not normal in the U.S., but here I think it might be normal.
It is very normal, yeah. It's not normal if you leave here. Yes,
exactly. And so here, my parents were like, well, until you get married, you're staying in our house. You're staying in the U.S. But I met my husband when I was 25, and he also had dreams of living outside the U.S. and having adventures and linguistic adventures. And we first went to Pakistan, actually.
Oh.
We lived there for a year, and our visas weren't renewed. We had to go back to the U.S., and it was really discouraging and sad for us that we had to leave our lives that we started building there. And so we started researching around where was pretty open to foreigners, accepting, easy to get a visa. And Kurdistan came up, and that had not been on our radar. We didn't really even know about Kurdistan.
And you never left since then?
Since getting here 7 years ago? Yeah. We've been back to the U.S. a couple times to visit family. But other than that, we've just lived here and have plans of staying here the rest of our lives. And most of the foreigners we know who come here, if they think about coming, they research it and they maybe take a trip or two to see if it would be good. When we heard about Kurdistan and we had a Zoom chat with a lady who lives here, we thought, that sounds great. And we just packed our bags up and moved here, just like that, and no regrets.
Easy, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm happy you have no regrets. I mean, usually when we talk to people, one of the things that I asked is, what was your initial, conception of the region?
Yeah.
And most people think, oh, it's the Middle East, it's Iraq, it's probably dangerous. And then we go like, okay, so it's not really that dangerous. Kurdistan is one of the safest places.
And it's safer than any of the places I've lived in the U.S., honestly. Yeah. I feel more safe here. And that's one thing that hit me very soon after arriving, was feeling like everyone in the city was my friend, my brother, my sister, my uncle. And I'm someone who I easily get lost. I love walking around, but I will get lost very easily. And so I remember just very soon after arriving, walking, I got totally lost in the city. But I felt, I went, and I had very little language at that point. I feel like I could go up to anyone and ask anyone for help, and they would help me. And so I found this lady. I didn't know much Kurdish at that point, But we communicated a little bit and she said, follow me. And I had no problem just following her.
Yeah.
I knew she would help me. And sure enough, she led me right to where I needed to go.
That's very interesting. I mean, so you had that perception before, or it was just other people having that perception that here is dangerous? Yeah. Or if I may ask, how has your perception changed after you came here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I never really had that perception. I don't know why, because maybe my family and friends had that perception of, oh, it's Iraq, that means war and bombs and things. But that wasn't really what was in my mind. It was just a new world, a new place, a new culture. I'm curious what it's like. I didn't really have solid ideas in my mind what it would be like.
Right.
And so it was living here month after month, year after year that built in my mind what the reality is.
Right. And do people really differentiate between Iraq and Kurdistan? And do they know like Kurdistan is a different place? And
most people don't, unfortunately. And I have to tell them.
Right.
They're like,
we have to tell them when we go out. Like,
right.
Okay, so where are you from? I'm from Kurdistan. Where is that?
Where is that?
Yeah.
Well, then you have to specify like Iraq just to give them an idea in their mind, but it gives them the completely wrong idea.
Yeah.
You have to be like, but it's not Iraq. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, very interesting. I mean, coming to Kurdistan and you're saying that you have no regrets. And I think part of your story includes something very, very interesting, and that's working with the deaf community here, yeah?
Yes, yeah.
What inspired you to work with them?
Yeah, like I said, I love languages and cultures from an early age, but even though I had encountered the deaf community, I was, for some reason, never interested in learning sign language. And I kind of regret that now until 8 years ago, my sister's fourth child was born. And after a month, my sister thought, I wonder if her hearing is okay. She took her to the doctor when she was just a month old, and they found out she was completely deaf, profoundly deaf. And that changed my whole family's world, thinking, we have a deaf family member. How do we connect with her if she's deaf? And so I immediately, that was the year that we were back from Pakistan before we came to Kurdistan. I immediately enrolled in American Sign Language classes to learn sign language, thinking we would have to use sign language to communicate with her. That's a whole other story. She did end up getting surgery that was successful so that she can hear. Wow. That's not always the case. That can always happen.
Right.
But for her, that helped. So they no longer use sign language with her. But that started my journey of meeting deaf people in the U.S., finding out the plight of deaf and how they need support, and people from the hearing world willing to reach out to them. And then when we came to Kurdistan, I thought, I wonder what life is like for the Kurdish deaf.
Yeah.
And it actually took several years of me asking around, where are the deaf? I know they're here. Can I just learn some Kurdish sign language? I knew that would be a different sign language.
Right.
And year after year, I would ask people, and I would find people say, no, I don't know of any deaf. And finally, I found the school for the deaf in our city.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. One of the things that I was wondering about is, when you have a newborn child, eventually they will learn, or they will pick up the language that you speak at home. But I was wondering, how is it like for a deaf child if they have hearing parents and they talk verbal language?
Yes, exactly. And most people don't realize this, but about 90% of deaf children are born to hearing parents. So the vast majority. And a very few hearing parents will learn sign language to communicate with their deaf children. So that does mean language deprivation happens. And language deprivation means all sorts of things that the child is missing out on in terms of emotional development, normal development for, just to be a normal individual.
Right.
So
if the parents don't speak or
don't use sign language.
Don't use sign language, then the child will face language deprivation, and
exactly.
they will grow up not speaking the language, or not using the language.
So I'll give you an example of what would often happen here in Suli, for example. Since there is a deaf school, let's say a child is born who's deaf. In the home, likely the family would create a few home signs just to be able to tell the child, oh, your mom is over there. So they would maybe have a sign. This is a common sign for mom.
Right.
And dad could be who knows what. Another sign, bazaar might be something else, food, something else. So they would just create themselves
basic communication.
Basic communication, nothing deep, nothing at all deep, to really make that deep connection. And then that would be all the communication that the child would have until he went to the deaf school and then started learning Kurdish Sign Language at the deaf school. Now, the hope would be that eventually he would get full language. But still, with those few years of missing out on important language acquisition, it does affect the brain somehow. I know that there's research done on that. That's not my field exactly, but it does affect natural development for the child, as well as, the connection between the family members.
Right. I'm curious for our viewers as well and our listeners. You talked about a school here in Slimani, a deaf school.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little about that? Where is it?
It's over near Dike.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's called Peymangay Hiwai Nabistan. And there's, I believe there are 5 cities in Kurdistan that have a deaf school. There should be way more than that because there are deaf in all parts of Kurdistan, but only 5 of the cities have a deaf school. Thankfully, here we have
What are those cities? So we have Slimani.
Slimani, Duhok, Hawler, Koya, and Kalar. All have one. Yeah. And the school, unfortunately, only goes through 9th grade. That's one thing we're really working on is to get rights to and access to higher education for the deaf here. They currently can't go to universities. That would take interpreters skilled in sign language to be able to interpret in the classrooms. So that's a whole field that we really need to work hard in to make that accessible to deaf individuals. But yeah, so it goes through 9th grade and the instruction is done in Kurdish Sign Language.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, imagine if they tell a hearing person that you can only study until 9th grade, and if you have hopes for higher education, you can't do that.
Exactly. And I have friends here who are deaf who are very intelligent, and they could have gone so far in studying if they had had the opportunity. And they still say, I wish I could study. And thankfully, they're working with me to bring the plight of the deaf further along, hoping that what they're doing now can the generation behind them can see the results, reap the benefits of. They're realizing that for them though,
and that's probably one of the reasons that why they are not represented in the corporate world, because you don't see many people in companies.
No.
Or you don't really see, even few people in companies working, or deaf people, I mean.
No, right, exactly. Here in Kurdistan, I think the most common job for a deaf person is carpentry. There's certain areas that you'll find the deaf more often will go to. There's just opportunities there for them. But unfortunately, most fields, you don't have open opportunities for deaf. But whereas in Europe and the US, you can have deaf in every area of work.
I was curious about that.
Every area of work. Presidents of universities, presidents of companies, business owners, chefs. You even have singers who are deaf. They have their own stories. Actors, doctors, medical professionals, every area you have people who are deaf. And really, the Kurdish community is missing out by not having our deaf people who are skilled in certain areas, just don't have the opportunity to pursue that. We're missing out by not having them in that area of society.
Have you been to the schools here in Kurdistan, the deaf schools?
So like, for instance, Peymangay Hiwai Nabistan over by Dike, I've been there a number of times.
Right.
Yeah, I've been there several times.
So is that a Peymanga or a state school?
It is a state school. I'm not sure. I don't know why it's called that exactly. Okay. But yeah, it's just a normal government school.
Oh, all right. Okay. And how's their curriculum? Like, what is it like? Do they study all the subjects? Or?
Yeah, I believe they study all the subjects. is my understanding. I'm not an expert on that, but I think they've studied all the subjects, and I think they even use the books from the regular schools.
Right. So by the way, you have contact with them. I have no contact whatsoever with them. So I'm curious when I ask you questions. You don't have to know everything.
Okay. Well, good, because I don't. That's
so
sure.
when I ask you questions, I mean, just as much as you know, so that people know what the deaf community is like in Kurdistan, because this is a very serious subject, to be honest. This is one of the podcasts that I will never regret doing.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. I hope you will never regret it.
Yeah, so I've probably seen construction workers, and maybe one, if I remember well. So construction workers, you said in carpentry, they work in carpentry as well.
Especially, yes. I know several people.
Do you know anyone who works in a different field, like a deaf person who?
So I have a friend named Kakzana who he is the only deaf person that I know who works in making eyeglasses because his dad was an eyeglass doctor and trained him. So that's something where deaf people might have a little more opportunity if they have a family member who takes them under their wing and trains them in a certain area. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been the training available to Kakzana. It was only because his dad trained him in making eyeglasses. I met a deaf lady last night who sews dresses.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's also good. Trying to think some of the teachers. So at the deaf school, you have hearing teachers, but then the deaf teacher assistants who are deaf.
Right.
And they make sure that the students understand the subject and that there's clarity of sign language communication in there. And so you have a number of teachers assistants who are deaf.
Yeah. So that's actually very interesting to know that, and probably one of the things that I think of is if parents have a deaf child, then they would probably think, oh, there's no future for our child here, and that's, to be honest, there's some logic to it. Because there are not many opportunities.
There aren't many opportunities here, unfortunately, but it is sad too. I've seen where parents, obviously it's seen in their eyes and the way they talk, that they see their deaf child as a burden, and that will come across to the child. But I have met many very intelligent, bright, eager, deaf children who've just given the opportunity, they will go very far and be a wonderful part of society, contributing to society. It'll just take believing in them and helping them take the right steps in the right direction.
Right. So I'm aware from you, of course, that American Sign Language and Kurdish Sign Language are two different worlds. Yeah.
Yes, very good.
How did you go about learning first American Sign Language? I mean, is it easy? I wouldn't say easy or difficult, but is it challenging?
I feel like American Sign Language would be one of the easiest languages to learn because it is so connected to English. It has its own grammar, I will say, but its grammar, the words, it's so connected to the culture in America that it kind of makes sense. It's easier, I feel like, than learning a foreign language. And there are so many community classes, resources online for learning ASL that it's really available to learn. Kurdish Sign Language, on the other hand, is more challenging for a number of reasons, but I think mainly because the resources are not there. There's not community classes. When I originally came here and wanted to learn Kurdish Sign Language, I thought, I'll just find a community class. There are community classes everywhere in the US. Surely there are community classes here. And lo and behold, I found out they're not available. And that hurts the deaf community. If there aren't language classes available for learning Kurdish Sign Language, then that means that their language isn't being spread. That means that there aren't interpreters being trained so that they can't connect to many areas of society because there aren't interpreters there for them. I've had deaf friends who struggle with going to a doctor and just simply having a doctor appointment. And she'll say, I remember one friend saying, I have to take my 10-year-old son to interpret for me. And that's a lot on the shoulders of a 10-year-old boy to communicate everything at a doctor's appointment. But she said, what else can I do? Government offices, education like we talked about. We need community classes so people can learn the language so that we can have interpreters trained so that, the communities can come together.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of organizations here in Kurdistan working in humanitarian field. So are there any that, are interested in working with the deaf community?
Good question. There is one that I know of here in Suli called, I believe, Amaja organization.
Amaja?
Started by, started by Mamosta Bahar.
Oh, this is a local organization.
Local organization here, yes. And started by Mamosta Bahar, who I have great admiration and respect for. She has done, maybe some of our listeners have heard of her. She's done so much work in the deaf community, tirelessly for years working for them. And so their organization exists to support the deaf community and fight for their rights. So that's great. Other than that, I know that there is actually a deaf organization, deaf-led in Dahuk. And I've met the president, Karzan, I believe, is his name. This is his name sign. I remember name signs a little easier than the names because they're used more in the deaf world.
Right.
But yeah, that community also exists in Dahuk, and they're doing some good things to support the deaf community. I'm not super aware of what's happening there.
Right. Well, that would be good. I mean, if there are even international organizations who work in, work with the deaf community, that would be very nice.
That needs to happen. That needs to happen.
Especially when you think that there are not educational opportunities for the deaf community beyond the 9th grade.
Yeah. And I will clarify that. So there's the deaf school that goes through 9th grade. Then thankfully, only in the past few years, one of the high schools in the city, this one is over by tێگەیشتنی. I believe it was the principal of the school opened its doors to have a small deaf class for deaf students to be able to do 10th through 12th grade. So it's a challenge. It's a new thing that's only happened in the past few years, but thankfully they have opened that up for very few select deaf students to be able to go through 10th through 12th grade. And then very recently too, there is a Paymanga technical institute somewhere. I'm trying to remember where. I visited recently. I don't quite remember where they've accepted deaf students to their institute just for learning computer. The challenge is, so I applaud them for accepting the deaf students.
Very good first step.
Yes, very good first step. The challenge is that they're not allowing an interpreter in the classroom. And so I've been with the girls. I taught them an English class for a little while. Wonderful, brilliant, motivated 6 deaf young girls. And but they're saying, Mamosta Hannah, can you help us? What can we do? We're in the classroom. We don't understand the teacher. It's not in sign language. So there needs to be a lot more steps going on for them to really be able to access the education. And it not only be just like computers that they can study, but so much more. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, the fact that you talk about the US and say there are doctors who are deaf, there are presidents of universities that are deaf. I mean, why wouldn't they be able to do that over here as well?
Right.
Yeah. And, speaking of the fact that there is a, complex grammar to sign language. So I believe that, there's a difference between sign language and body language. Yeah. So we all use body language.
Right. Body language doesn't have grammar. It doesn't, it's not an actual language. It's just like certain gestures or whatever.
Right.
But sign language is a full language with full vocabulary and grammar. And you can express as much what you can express spoken, you can express in sign language. You can express depth of feeling, what you're thinking. You can express.
So yeah, sign language. There's sign language and there's verbal language as well. So they're 2 different languages. But I would say that probably body language is complementary to verbal language.
Sure,
but you cannot express everything in body language.
No, not at all. Right, exactly.
So they're 2 different things, And another thing that you talked about the other day, and it was very interesting to me, and I was wondering, so how would they call James, and then how would they call Muhammad, for example? And you said they're different.
Yeah.
So everyone has a different name, yeah?
Yeah, they're different sign names. So it's really fun, and it's an indication that you've really entered the deaf world if you're given by a sign name by a deaf individual. And sign names need to be given by deaf people. It's not like me as a hearing person, I can't make up my own sign name. It really needs to be given by the deaf community. So my sign name is this because my...
Probably it's because of your hair.
My hair, exactly. Yeah. And then my name is Hannah, and finger spelling in American Sign Language is H-A-N-N-A-H. So H at the beginning and then my hair coming down. Right. So that's where I got mine.
Can you do that again? Like, yeah, so like H, no, H, the spelling?
Oh, H-A-N-N-A-H.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
But now in Kurdish finger spelling, that's Hana.
So with the modest level of, sign language that you have, Kurdish sign language that you, can you give people names?
Like a sign name, you mean? Like this is my sign name?
For example, can you give me a name, a sign name?
It has to be, and this is kind of a general rule in the deaf world, it has to be given by a deaf person.
Right.
And I've had many people come up, maybe when I've presented with some deaf friends or some hearing people have come up and met some deaf people, and they hear about sign names and they get excited and they're like, I want a sign name, please. Can you please give me a sign name?
Right.
And the answer is always, we need to spend time together because it's given according to maybe personality or something that stands out on the face or some feature that they do again and again, or it takes time for the sign name to be given. So it's not something that can just be given like that normally.
True. Do you know a Muhammad?
I know a Muhammad, yes.
And what is the sign for that Muhammad?
It's he wears glasses and his hair is kind of like this. So normally we do this for him. Yeah. There's another Muhammad who's deaf. So that was a hearing Muhammad who was given that name.
Oh, okay.
There's another Muhammad who's deaf and his sign name is that. And I'm not sure where this came from, but that's his sign name.
Right.
Yeah. But they have the same name, Muhammad, but their sign name is different.
Okay. So you also talked about the names of cities as well.
Yeah.
So is there a consensus on names of cities? Like more general things like cities?
Right.
And countries maybe?
There is. I will say that there are some cities that have a couple of signs, but for the most part, there's a consensus, yes. But like Hălə, for example, I believe that is one of the signs, but the one that's most used by the deaf community is this, which is also the sign for yogurt. And I believe that Hălə is known for their yogurt. Is that correct?
True.
And so I think that's why. So this is Hălə and also yogurt.
And probably this is the citadel?
Yes, I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, and then you also talked about Halabja as well. That was also interesting.
Yes, Halabja, right. Yeah. And that comes from the Kimya Baran.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, very interesting. So far, I mean, we've talked about very interesting things related to the deaf community in Kurdistan. So one of the other things that I wanted to talk about is the misconceptions that people have about the deaf community in Kurdistan, or that deaf people encounter in Kurdistan. What would be some misconceptions?
I think the biggest misconception is that deaf people are often not seen as whole individuals who are intelligent and capable of living a full, normal life. That's the biggest thing. I'm with my deaf friends outside, and then maybe someone comes up to us. This happens in the bazaar often. I'm with a deaf friend, and then someone will come up in the bazaar and start talking to my deaf friend because he or she's Kurdish, and so they're thinking, I'm going to speak Kurdish with not the blonde one who probably doesn't know Kurdish. And they're kind of just staring at them like, I don't know. And then I respond in Kurdish, and this person is just like, what's going on?
What's going on?
But yeah, when they find out, I'm like, oh, just to explain, well, she's deaf. That's why she's not responding to you. The immediate response is, oh, gunaha.
Yeah.
Oh, this, that poor person, not realizing that she does actually have a full life.
Yeah.
And yes, it is unfortunate she doesn't have all of the rights and opportunities that she should have. But my deaf friends, almost all of them will say, I love my life and I enjoy being deaf and I love my deaf community and my language. I'm very proud of my language. So not looking at the negative, but rather looking at the individual and the positive there and what they have and are experiencing.
They're actually gunah if you call them gunah.
Yes.
Yeah,
right. So. Yeah, very good. other misconceptions, there's quite a few. I would say some misconceptions about myself I would like to clear up. Okay. I'm not a sign language expert, for example.
That's fine.
Yeah, some people have thought that I am, for example, a sign language teacher, and actually I am learning sign language, and so the deaf people are my teachers. I am learning from them.
Wow.
So that's something else. Some people have thought that I have brought sign language to Kurdistan, and I'm like, no, it has been here. No,
it wasn't me.
It wasn't you.
It was here. You didn't notice it.
Exactly. So yeah, just to clarify, it's been here. It has its own history, Kurdish Sign Language. I'm just coming to help spread Kurdish Sign Language and what is already here.
Yeah. We'll get back to this, but I would like to talk about your experience in Kurdistan with regards to cultural exchange. Sure. And one of the things that people usually talk about is experiencing culture shock when they go to a new place.
Yes.
How was your experience here when you first came?
I would say in general, we had a really good transition. Just really enjoyed it. Enjoyed wandering. We have always lived kind of near the Saholika area. And so wandering Saholika at night, going down to the bazaar, meeting people has just been fun. The challenges have been, for example, the different idea of time and appointments. Right. And you say you're going to do something and then maybe no one shows up actually. I'm like, did I misunderstand? Or we said 3:00 and I'm there because I'm American. I get there at 2:45 if we say 3:00 just to make sure, and waiting around a long time. So
I guess that's a cultural difference. Yeah.
Yes.
And you were confused about it.
Yes.
So yeah, sometimes when we, there's this thing that people, especially those who speak English and who are familiar with the Western culture, they would go like, okay, 3:00 Kurdish or 3:00, 3:00.
Exactly,
and we go like, okay, 3:00 Kurdish, okay?
Yeah, right.
So that means
like,
probably means 3:10, 3:15, yeah.
Or 4:00. Yes, exactly.
That is a bit too extreme, yeah, 4:00. Yeah, so that would be, any other differences between...
One thing I remember being so surprising to me, and I still kind of laugh at this, I think my family, especially, my dad was an early to bed, early to rise. And so when we had guests over at our house around 8:30 or 9:00 in the evening, he would start saying, okay, I'm locking up. Time for you to go home.
Right.
Like be very, very open about that. And so that was
he actually this open about it?
Yeah.
With people?
Yes,
wow.
he was. Yes, very much so. And our family friends kind of knew it and understood and just laughed. That was my
doesn't
dad.
upset them or when you say that?
No.
Like, I mean, it would get you into trouble if you say that here.
Oh yeah, here I know exactly.
I am the same, by the way. I
really?
go to bed very early and I rise up very early. But if I have guests, I wouldn't mind, staying awake until 1:00, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. Yeah,
great.
so I mean, we wouldn't say that here.
Yeah,
like,
no, you wouldn't.
All right, now time to sleep. Get out.
No, you wouldn't. You'd be so offensive.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I grew up with, was being able to kind of, if I'm tired, be open, maybe just saying I'm tired, like time for you to go. But here, there's an importance on people and the relationship that really is beautiful, that I love. It's just been a challenge for me to see the beauty of that and go towards that and change myself and being okay with, guests staying until 10:00, 11:00, 12:00, really late, and saying, sleep is not that important. The people are important. And I'm just so thankful that I'm honored that they're here at my house. I remember a few years ago being at my friend's house. I was spending the night at her house, and it was 10:30 at night, and her relatives show up for a visit. And I thought, 10:30 at night? Like they show up for a visit at that time? Yeah. That just blew my mind.
Yeah.
And of course, for them, it was so common and fine.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's very common here. I mean, just show up for a tea and then...
And then I took a trip to Hauraman with some deaf friends a couple years ago. And that was a whole other experience. We all stayed, it was several families and me, and we stayed in kind of just a house. Like I think one of them had a connection to. Right. And it was just all night partying. Okay, at 1:00 we're going to make cake. Well, at 3:00 we're going to make pizza, like in the morning, and then the kids are also up doing that. And I thought this would never happen in the US. It was just so different for me. I felt like I was in a different world. Yeah.
There's a very strong sense of community.
Very strong.
Which is very, We're actually proud of that, and we love it.
Absolutely should be. It's really beautiful. I imagine in my mind, as I've tried to understand what feels so different here in Kurdistan compared to the US, is I feel like the community here is like this. And it means that you annoy each other a lot. It means that you get, you have to tire yourself out for other people. You're inconvenienced a lot. But it's doing life together, and there's so much benefit to that. Whereas in the US, we've kind of built our little safety lives, and we stay apart more. And I think that that's to our detriment, honestly.
I see. I understand. I mean, yeah, very interesting that you have noticed that about Kurdistan. They say people are very social. We are very, very, very social.
Very, 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 yes.
Yeah. And speaking of the trip that you've taken with your friends, so back to the deaf community, so what would be very rewarding working with the deaf community?
Yes, it is very rewarding to me anytime. It's very fun anytime that anyone will come up and thank me for my videos and what I'm sharing, but it is 1,000 times more rewarding when I have deaf individuals thank me and say that they feel seen and heard because of what I'm sharing. We've worked with, so for example, Kak Ahmed, Kak Rizgar, they're in Dahuk and Howler, Avin Khan here, Blessa, Zana, several deaf individuals that we've been putting some Kurdish Sign Language instructional videos on YouTube to make it available out to the public. So not just focusing on doing sign language classes, but also getting instructional videos up on YouTube and out to the world in all of Kurdistan. And they'll proudly show their family, look what we're doing, feeling a pride in how they're working for their language. And when they went to the deaf school in Koya, I believe, unfortunately, sign language is not used in that school. I'm hoping that they'll work to get sign language to be used in the school. I think it's focused more on reading and writing and voicing is my understanding. And so when they visited there, Kak Ahmed, who's deaf, for example, showed them some of the YouTube videos to the deaf students who didn't know sign language yet. And he was like, look, this is Kurdish sign language, and showing them to them for them to be able to learn. So the pride that they have in what we're producing makes it all worth it to see that in their faces.
I saw one of your videos on Instagram, and it was for I guess a deaf friend of yours.
Okay, maybe.
You were saying follow his TikTok.
Ziad.
Kak Ziad, yeah?
Yes, Kak Ziad.
Okay, and what kind of content does he do on TikTok?
Yes.
Because I was thinking, all right, so now social media is a way to make money.
Sure.
So that would be an opportunity probably for them, yeah?
Yeah, it could be. I think for now, for the most part, they just see it as a way of getting themselves out there and their voice heard, getting their language shared. Kak Ziad is a 19-year-old, I believe, student at the deaf school. Very motivated and excited to connect with people. He
was very lively.
Very lively. I just love his personality so much. Very eager to learn language. So unfortunately, he does share sign language videos, which is great. I totally support him in doing that. Unfortunately, he kind of does this mixture of Arabic sign language and some, I think, even British sign language he'll mix in and Kurdish sign language. So if you want kind of a mixed language, go and watch his videos.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
if not, then just support him and follow him on TikTok.
Exactly.
Yeah, that would be very nice. So did you have any linguistic, or do you still have any linguistic or cultural barriers here?
Yes, I would say a lot. Hopefully there are opportunities I would like to think of, but as I'm doing work with Kurdish Sign Language, it's taken me to areas where I do need a high level of Kurdish, Sorani, spoken Kurdish knowledge. If we're at seminars or just table discussions, working on projects together, it's challenged my Kurdish abilities.
By the way, let me tell you this. I've heard you speak Kurdish, and from a native speaker perspective, I would say your Kurdish is very good.
Oh, thank you.
And sometimes they tell me my English is very good.
Yes, it is very good.
But I don't understand what they mean by very good. But I would say, so just so you know, I would say your Kurdish is probably near native. Wow. So your Kurdish is very good, actually. When I see you speak Kurdish, I'm like, wow, that's good. I mean, I saw you on a show, and you were talking about complex ideas, and it was nice. Not very complex, but I mean, just talking about life. That would be that would be very nice. So I would say, your Kurdish is very good. There's room for improvement always. Just always, like, you know,
absolutely. Kurdish is such a deep, rich language. Like I just want to continue to learn and learn and learn more about the vocabulary and the grammar, because I don't think I can ever stop learning. Yeah,
don't be surprised if you come across a lot of Arabic words, maybe Persian words sometimes, because it's, you know, we use them a lot. So, and it's fine.
It's hard for me to figure out, because it is nice to have a pure language, you know, to use the Kurdish word if there is a Kurdish word for it. But then sometimes the Kurdish word that I'll maybe hear people say, oh, that this is the Kurdish word. It's a word that no one uses, no one really knows.
True.
And so, maybe
sometimes
the
they go like, you sound awkward if you speak that way. So the one last thing that I want to talk about to you is living in Kurdistan. I'm sure that you've had a rich experience here. You've been here for 7 years. What would be something that you would take back home, like a lesson or something that you've learned here? Because we always, like I said before the podcast, we were talking, and I was like, when I ask foreigners, what is something that you love about Kurdistan? They go like, Prag. And I'm like, okay, apart from the Prag, what is something nice about the people, the culture?
Well, definitely the level of respect between people and care. It really inspires me to deeply care for others the way that the Kurds care for people. And I will say this. So I hope that I will see the Kurds going forward in embracing the deaf community and seeing the potential that they have. So that's somewhere they could grow in. But at the same time, for people who are maybe less well off in society, who have needs in society, Kurdish people are very generous. And I think the world can learn about the open hearts and open hands of the Kurdish people.
Right.
Just seeing, knowing a little bit of the history of the Kurdish people, I need to learn a whole lot more. The resilience of the Kurdish people to stand up to great trials and difficulties and continue to embrace and carry on their heritage and their culture and their pride of being Kurdish has really inspired me. And then, my closest, deepest, most meaningful relationships are with my Kurdish friends. I feel like there is a depth that I can go to with my Kurdish friends that I never personally found with my friends back in the US. Not to say that it can't happen, but just for my experience.
Sure.
There is a faithfulness and a depth of friendship here that has really been beautiful to me and life-giving.
Well, that's very nice. And it's very nice of you to say that.
Well, it is what it is. I only speak from my experience.
Yeah. All right. Hana, thank you very much for being here again.
Yes, it was a
and
joy.
I really appreciate it that you've come to talk about such important topic. And obviously, this is a topic that people need to be aware of and need to address more often.
Exactly.
And hopefully, other people or more people will come on this podcast to talk about this subject. I would be interested in that as well, because as a person who's interested in language myself, I would love to delve into other topics related to language, especially things like sign language.
That would be great. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you again so much for having me here. And it was such a joy to share from my little experiences. As I think I've mentioned, like, I'm not an expert. I haven't studied in this, but I'm hoping I can inspire other people from my story to go out and serve whatever communities that are grabbing their heart, or to join in serving and embracing the deaf community here in Kurdistan.
That's beautiful. Anyways, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was a joy.
And thanks to everyone. We'll see you in the next podcast.